Very
Okay, so we'll start. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamai Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Gurun Shri Padakamalan Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Sirupam Sagrajatam Sahagna Raghunathan Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijanam Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagna Lalita Sri Vishakhanvitam Sha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute तप्त कंचना गौरंगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रस्थाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामीति नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देश तारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैता गदाधर शिवसादि गौर भक्त वृंदा हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे हरे राम 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 हरे Hare Krishna. So we are in fourth chapter talking about transcendental knowledge. And in this chapter, Krishna very much talks about Niskam Karma Yoga for purification and then leads the discussion to uh, Gyan Yoga, which is finally for the liberation. So in this chapter, we saw a few verses that's talking about how to receive this transcendental knowledge. And then Krishna talks about his Janman Karma Rahasya. And then he also talks about that all of this path uh, that's out there, it's all basically created by him and it's culminates to taking the conditioned soul uh, back to him. So wherever they are, slowly and slowly, they will proceed and come up in their consciousness. And then he talks about that how even by doing all types of action, one would not incur the reaction. Tyaktva karm phala sanga sangam. By rejecting the karm phala, fruits of one's action, one would not incur the reactions. And Krishna, gives this as a very profound guidelines to Arjun and says that many people in past they have basically followed this path that they did not really got engaged in enjoying the fruits of their action. So that's what, and then he talks about the concept of karma, which is prescribed duty, and then karma, which is forbidden or prohibited action. And then he talks about a karma, action which does not incur any reaction. And then he says that a person who acts with the goal that Brahma Karma Samadhina, he is acting with the goal that Brahmayuva Tena Gantavyam, whatever he is doing will ultimately lead him to the absolute truth. And in that samadhi, if he acts, then everything that he does becomes spiritual. So from here onward, Krishna will uh, teach Arjun that by engaging in niskam karma, and we saw the multiple qualities of a niskam karma yogi, you have sufficient purification, and that purification now should lead to gyan, transcendental knowledge. And then he says that what are different types of sacrifice, uh, different types of yagya that can lead one to the transcendental knowledge. So in this section, we'll see that personalities who have different objective, different adhikar, by giving the fruits of that particular adhikar to Supreme Lord, he comes to the stage of transcendental knowledge. So yagya literal means fire sacrifice where you have some oblation. But here yagya not necessarily mean fire sacrifice, rather duty or uh, one's particular dharma at that time, which is being used only to please Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we'll see series of verses here, and I'll try to go through that quickly. Before we start talking, is there anything else that anybody would like to share? 1 or 2 minutes. I want to give sufficient time so that we be more interactive. That's the purpose. Okay. So in verse number 25, Krishna says, Daivam eva pare yagyam yoginah parupasate brahm agnava apare yagyam yagnaiva pahu juhvati apajuhvati. So Daivam eva pare yagyam. There are yogis who worship the demigods by different sacrifices. Brahm agnau apare yagyam. And there are Gyan yogi who offers their sacrifice into fire of Brahman. So demigod worship or Brahman worship. And then he talks about uh, brahmacharis, two types of or even girhastha who are sacrificing their senses or who are sacrificing their sense object through the yagya of uh, fire of the senses. And by that, they are getting to the higher stage. So whatever adhikara or adhikar one has, by engaging that adhikar to please Supreme Personality of Godhead, that particular sacrifice is being called here as uh, yagya. A person who is inspired, who wants to achieve self-realization, he controls the urges of his sense by controlling the mind. So that is also yagya that that one is doing, or a person who is aspiring for self-realization is doing. So through self-control, one is aspiring to achieve self uh, realization. And then Krishna continues talking about so many different types of yagya. Draw yagyas, tapo yagya, yoga yagyas, tathapare, swadhyaya yagya, yagyasya, yatyah shamsita taha. So draw yagya means sacrifice of one possession through the process of charity. Tapo yagya by performing severe austerity. Or yoga yagya, yoga yagya, sacrifice of sacrifice the yoga of eightfold mysticism. And then swadhyay yagya, studying the Veda to advance in transcendental knowledge. So these are all different types of yagya. And then pranayam, controlling the breathing process. So through all of these yagya, one can elevate their consciousness and come to the stage where the person has sufficient purification to understand this transcendental knowledge. So purification is needed. Even some of this concept, although it's not talking about bhakti yogi, but purification is needed to understand the transcendental knowledge. Sarve api yeta yagya vido yagya chipita kalmashaha yagya shishtamrita bhujo yanti brahma sanatanam. So all of these sacrifices cleanse one's sinful reaction. So what these sacrifices does, and we saw many of those here, it basically cleans one's sinful reaction. And by that, they advance towards the supreme personality of Godhead. Okay, so series of verses that we saw here, ultimately from 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, it has very much summarized through verse 30 that all sinful reactions are destroyed by the process of yagya. Prabhupada also uh, emphasized that in his purport that the aim of most of the sacrifice is to basically purify one's existence. So this yagya is not separate than niskam karmi yoga. So a person who understand what is niskam karmi yoga, at niskam karma stage, one is acting for the satisfaction of supreme personality of Godhead, right? So that you have to carry here. So a person who is engaged in charity, dravayagya or tapoyagya, he is doing all of that to please supreme personality of Godhead, and in that way it brings him to the stage where all the sins has been completely nullified. And then he further talks that nayam loko vasti agnasya kuto anya purusatma. A person who does not engage in this sacrifice, one cannot live happily in this life. What to talk about the next life. So it's very important that there should be some tapasya one do in their personal life, because by doing this tapasya, and this tapasya, by the way, I'm not going to repeat it again and again, but please carry in the background that these are done without enjoying the fruits of the action, which means to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So if one is not engaged in that type of sacrifice, then one cannot live happily in this life. What to talk about the next life? एवं बहु विधा यज्ञ वितात ब्रह्मणो मुखे कर्मजन विधितन सर्वन एवं ज्ञात्वा विमुक्षसे. So all of these different types of sacrifices, evam bahu vidha yagyam, all these different types of methods, vidha, all of these different types of methods of yagya, vitata brahmano mukhe. It's not somebody's speculation, but it's presented in Veda. It's coming from the Vedic teaching. So knowing them as such, you will become liberated. So you will become very qualified now to understand the transcendental knowledge. Rishabdev Maharaj, somebody has to please mute yourself if you. And while we are doing the class, it's 1 hour session. I request that pay attention to be part of the discussion and ask questions, discuss, help each other. Don't be distracted. It's very important. Years and years, times and again, we have to read these teachings. Every time I do it, it gives me a little higher understanding than I had before. So there is no limit uh, to this. It's not like that I got it and I got it. No, keep on meditating. All we are doing is that we are just meditating on these words of absolute truth. So that's how we take it. So I was talking about Bhagavatam. Rishabdev Maharaj, teaches to his son that, my dear son, human life is for sacrifice. So you need to engage yourself in sacrifice to attain sufficient purification so that you can understand this transcendental knowledge. And then this verse number 33 is basically culmination of all the yagya. So once you have sufficient purification, Sriyan Dravya Mayad Yagnaj Gyan Yagna Param Tapa Sharvam Karmakhilam Partha Gyane Parisham Apyate. So Sriyam Dravya Mayad Yagnaj Gyana Yagna Param Tapa. So Sriyan Dravya, by performing the sacrifice as a shakam karma. So the person who is engaged in sacrifice as a shakam karma, where they still have some attachment with the fruits of the result, Krishna says that if you performed the yagya as Gyan Yogi, as Gyan Yagya, where you are not attached to the fruits of the result. So Sakam Karmyogi, Niskam Karmyogi, Sakam Karmyogi has not sufficient purification. Since he does not have sufficient purification, he is still attached with the results of his action. So the attachment is there. And so Dravyagya here refers to basically engaging in yagya with some degree of attachment. So higher than that is Gyan Yagya, where you are you are engaged in yagya without attachment. And if you have that, then all of these sacrifices ultimately culminate in transcendental knowledge. So, literally, if we track, Krishna has very much given the process that how from Shakam to Niskam one can come to the stage of Jnana, Jnana Yoga. So, third chapter we summarized talking about sense control. Krishna Arjuna is asking, I understand everything that you said, but still we have people who are engaged in sensual activities. And Krishna said, yes, because they have to have sense control, and then their senses has to be controlled by their mind, and their mind has to be controlled by intelligence. So if intelligence controls the mind and mind controls the senses, then that way it's easier to conquer over the lust, the calm that living beings are. And then he further says that once one is engaged as Niskam Karmyogi, then he needs to have sufficient purification. So the earliest stage of Niskam Karma Yoga is purification. And higher stage, when you are about to now understand the transcendental knowledge, you are now on the liberation stage. So that's what our Supreme Father is saying here. That Shriyan Dravya Mayad Yajnas Gyan Yagna Parantapa Sarvam Karmakhilam Partha Sarvam, Sarvam, all of these karma kilam partha. Oh, whatever we have talked about, oh partha, and whatever we have talked about, jnane parishampayate. It leads, parishampayate. It will lead, it will make one qualified to understand this transcendental knowledge. Okay, so then after this, Krishna will give a process that how one can, the methods basically. He will give the methods that how one can understand this transcendental knowledge, how one should try to receive this transcendental knowledge. So I'll give a pause once again and would like to hear some of you commenting on some of these verses. We'll start with I guess Manohar Krishna Prabhu. Prabhu, you have anything that you want to talk a little bit?
Hare Krishna Prabhu,
Hari Hari
thank
Dandavad.
you very much, Pranav. So, as I can summarize what you just said, I mean, basically, it starts with sense control. I mean, initially, as living entities, we want to exploit the nature, we want to enjoy. The enjoying tendency is very high. So, we want to, and we foolishly think that through the senses, we'll get the ultimate lasting happiness, um, which we may, by good association or good experience, we realize, okay, senses are not the ultimate source of happiness. So we try to somehow or other take the path of devotees, and do some sense control, um, and then ultimately through that we do nishkam sakam karma and then nishkam karma, which has two stages: purification and liberation. So purification, and then which leads to jnana. So even if we are doing sacrifices related to giving the fruits of our labor, like in 12th chapter Bhagavad Gita, we the yoga ladder is described there. So if we give that um, fruits of our labor, then slowly, slowly we get purified, and that leads to knowledge, um, and knowledge that everything belongs to Krishna, and therefore we should be obliged and be give everything to him. So
Beautiful, beautiful summary. Thank you, Babu. At least that tells me that I'm able to explain some of these things. If you would not have been explained that, or maybe this is your prior knowledge, but pretty good summary. Anybody would like to just say something like Prabhu said? Don't, yeah, just, uh, if you like, please. Okay, let's hear from Sadbhujanand Das Prabhu.
Sorry, Prabhuji.
I'm sure
I
you all have studied this before. What is your understanding?
Yes, Prabhuji. So sorry. First of all, I was kind of late today, so I'm
No
around
problem, Prabhu.
something else. So yeah. So one point I connected from your discussion is that how the sacrifice is a must thing, and how it purifies the or it cleanses our sinful reactions. So that is the one point I connected from this discussion, Prabhuji.
Thank you. Anybody would like to share anything? Bhaskar Prabhu, do you have anything? Let's hear from Bhaskar Prabhu. Prabhu, are you there? Not there, maybe. You have anything, Amagnam Prabhu? Can you give a good summary of what we have been talking?
Yeah, bro. We have been talking about all the sacrifices which Krishna has listed it down, whether it's charity or whether it's austerity or any scriptural study. All sacrifices are leading to Krishna himself. But also, he's saying that all the sacrifices with the background of Nishkam Karma Yoga will give you better results, even though some sacrifices can give you some kind of enjoyment for the living entity. But when you have the background of Nishkam Karma Yoga to those sacrifices, it can you give you the best result. And out of those sacrifices, also Krishna is saying that any sacrifice which is performed with the background of knowledge, that will give you higher results. So
Excellent, excellent. Very good. Awesome. Veena Mataji, you have anything?
Yes, Prabhuji. So what I understood with sacrifice, about sacrifice is like whatever qualities, whoever, like, whatever gifts, if some that people have. For example, somebody is good at writing, so we use our writing skill for the service of Krishna, in not for the, like, the uh, suppose we write something good and we enjoy the, like, oh, we bask in the glories of all the, all the appreciation that we get, but that won't be called as sacrifice. But if we write, use our writing skill as for the glorification of Lord, so that our writing skill becomes ahuti for the yajna. Is that
Excellent.
my
Yes,
understanding right?
that's what this verse, in fact, 24 verse, if you really see, the other verses are very much explaining this verse 24. Brahm arpanam brahm havir, brahm agno brahman hutam, brahmaiva tena gantavyam, brahm karma samadhina. Exactly. But such the same concept we'll talk little bit more once we talk about bhakti yoga. And then we'll bring the concept of yukt vairagya. You are right.
Mm.
So when we try to engage our activity in pleasing service of Krishna, then those are not the material activity. It's a spiritual. Arpanam, Havir, Agnav, Uttam, everything, if it's done for Brahmayuvatena Gantavyam, if it's done with the objective that is to please as a samadhi, completely absorbed in pleasing the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then all of that becomes a spiritual. Yes, yes. So this concept will continue a little bit more once we start talking, from chapter 7th onward. Pretty good. Okay, let's hear from others. Who else would like to share some of their understanding so far? Santa Mataji, are you there?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Can you please summarize what your understanding is so far?
So just as mentioned, right, in the Vedas, there are a lot of sacrifices are described. So these sacrifices are maybe for different purposes.
What are the different purpose?
So like maybe what I think are different types of work. But suppose if you need sun, then that type of igna will be there, right?
So what is the
So the
purpose you are talking about, Mataji?
purpose means so suppose if I'm doing igna, maybe I wanted to have something, and that's where I'm doing igna. So in the Vedas itself, so for this purpose you can do this igna. It's all described, right? That's what it's mentioning. You said.
One second, Mataji, please.
Sorry, am I saying wrong? Like
No, no,
what
no,
I'm
no.
saying.
No, the last part I didn't catch.
No, what I'm saying is, if you want something, you're doing some sacrifices. Maybe that sacrifice is for something, or maybe getting the knowledge and reaching out to the God, right? So at the end, it is you said like, so rather than doing for the material things, better to do for getting gnana and reaching out to Krishna. That's what I got it.
Yeah, Mataji. So we are talking here that we don't have multiple objectives.
Mm-hmm.
As a Niskam Karma Yogi, now we have a foundation of the Niskam Karma Yogi. So who are the Niskam Karma Yogi? Niskam Karma Yogi is a person who has these qualities from verse number 21 to 23. So now Mataji, we have become Niskam Karma Yogi. So as a Niskam Karma Yogi, what Niskam Karma Yogi is doing? He has no attachment. Tyaktva karm phalashangam. He has no attachment with the results of his action. And then all of these qualities that we read, in last class. Now, as an Niskam Karma Yogi, whatever adhikar you are, wherever you are now using that to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then we are summarizing that all of these sacrifices that that we have just talked about, and there are a few more, all of these will lead one to become sinful from all the reaction, and then finally it will make one qualified to understand the transcendental knowledge. All sacrifices work culminate in transcendental knowledge. So
Amen.
we have objective of ultimately be able to understand the transcendental knowledge, the knowledge that's talking about Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is basically what this does in very practical way, that it establishes your sambandha. Now you have a formed relationship with Supreme Personality of Godhead. So who the Supreme Personality of Godhead is, who the living beings are, and what is their relationship in context of material existence. So objective Mataji is basically one, which is to be able to understand the transcendental knowledge, which is these three things. So we don't have multiple objective, Mataji. Our objective is that we don't want to basically, spend charity. We are not doing for sake of, people will say that, oh, okay, uh, Ramacharya is, Danvir Kharn, or no, all of that we are doing to please Supreme Lord, and that will purify all of our sin, and then finally will be qualified to receive the transcendental knowledge. Thank you so much for sharing
Prabhuji,
your.
just
Yes,
yeah,
Mataji.
just a question. So on the above 32, it is said that there are different sacrifices for different types of works, right?
Ji Mataji, yes. Says many types of
So here,
sacrifices are described in the Veda. So all
so
of
here,
these. Ji, go ahead.
no, my
Yes,
question is,
Mataji.
what are these different types of work?
So these are different types of sacrifices, and we talked about here that there is dravayagya where one is using their possession. Like for example, you use your money to support Sunday feast, or invite devotee at your house to come uh, and have prasad. Tapoyagya, means uh, very silently we focus and meditate at feet of Supreme Personality of Godhead. Swadhyayagya is this one right now. We are doing Swadhyayagya. There are so many things we could be doing at this time, but this time we are trying to study the science of Krishna consciousness, right? We also study Bitrag Bhaya Krodha. Krishna says that what is the tapasya of the knowledge, right? Tapasya of the knowledge is that one should adhere with the authentic teaching that is talking about absolute truth or realization of the absolute truth, ultimate truth. So that's tapasya. So these are some of the types of tapasya we are talking about. Engaging in the pranayama, right? We are basically engaging in serving the Supreme Lord. So that's what we are talking about. So all of these, he says that evam bahu bidha yagya, all of these different types of yagya, bidha means types, no, bahu bidha, different types or multiple types. So all these multiple types of yagya that we have talked, all of them are brahmano mukhe. It's all coming from the literal meaning of that. It's all coming from the mouth of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. These are all bona fide as long as it's done to please Supreme Personality of Godhead. And if that's happening, then such type of yagya will qualify you to be liberated. Now we have to understand the meaning of liberation here may be at this point, at the stage of Niskam Karma Yoga Mataji, it could be that your goal is Brahman. At higher stage, in chapter 6, it will be Paramatma. And 7 onward, it will become Bhagwan. So liberation means Mukte Hitva Sarupena Vyavasthita. All Surapadhi Binur Mukte Tat Parvatena Nirmalam Risikena Risikesa Sevanam Bhaktir Uchyate. What is bhakti called? Surapadhir Binur Muktam. All designation, I, me, mine, Indian, American, white, black, old, young, सब कुछ Binur Mukte has been given up, rejected. So here it says that knowing them as such, you will become liberated. We'll understand that. Brahman realization, Paramatma realization, and slowly we'll get to the stage where we'll talk about Bhagwan realization. Brahmameti, Paramameti, Bhagwaneti, Sabdate. These are the three features of Supreme Personality of Godhead. But the ultimate truth is Bhagwan. Thank you so much. Very nice. Anybody would like to share anything? Ji, Prabhuji.
Prabhu, can I ask a question?
Ji, please go ahead. Ask Prabhu.
Thank you. One question popped into mind while you were saying that. You said, as long as the intention is to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead, our sacrifice is bona fide if it falls under one of these categories, right? The various categories mentioned in this chapter. My question is intention or my intention enough? Like, for example, Suppose I want to teach yoga asana for maybe taking care of health reasons to the devotees, or maybe yoga asanas will ultimately bring them to the platform of some kind of sense control, and it will ultimately bring them to devotion. So although my intention might be to bring them to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead by bringing them on the devotional side and more sense control side. So is that my intention enough, or I need to be guided by someone else to properly tell how to execute it? Because my intention may be very fabulous, but my execution may be very, very bad.
Mm, very good question. Let's discuss. Let's hear from others. Very good. So if I rephrase your questions, Prabhuji, you are saying that I might have an intention to help somebody,
Right.
and I might engage that person, maybe depending on where they are, in some sort of yoga type of process.
Yeah.
And that process will lead that person to become devotee at some point. That's your intent is. So do you think that is it good enough that I just handle and deal with that person, or do I need to have somebody else guiding me?
Yeah. I
This is
mean,
very good question. In fact, if that's what you are asking, then this is very
yeah.
powerful question. And next verse is going to answer that. Tad vidhi Prani Patena paripasnena sunya.
I
Updechanti
see.
te jnanam jnanistha tato darshana. So
I
you are
see.
logically thinking, right? Or you are into it. So if you
Mhm.
see this verse, that's what exactly Krishna is saying here. So exactly what you are asking is going to be answered here.
Hmm.
So can we take this verse and then have some more discussion back to your question?
Sure, sure.
So all the verses that you see a star, this is the verse that you have to memorize. So please, whenever you see the verse star or sign of asterisk on that particular verse, make a note and kindly try to memorize it. So this verse, how to attain the Gyan, right? We have been talking about attaining the Gyan. So here Krishna is going to give a very profound process. He says, Tadivadi Prani Patena, Prani Prasnena Sevaya, Updichanti Te Jnanam, Jnanis Tattvadarshinaha. Beautiful verse, most of you know. So he says three things. How to receive this knowledge? He says, receive this knowledge from a spiritual master. So, Prani Patena means surrender, be subservient. This is a very important concept, by the way. We don't like taking this. It's very hard. How can I be subservient to somebody? But Krishna is saying here that if you want to understand the transcendental knowledge, he gives one criteria is that you have to be pranipatena. You have to be subservient. And pari prasnena, asking the question. Prasnena, pari prasnena, ask the question. And then sevaya, serve. So reach, approach a spiritual master, ask him the question and serve him. Why? Updechanti te jnanam. Because he has, so updeshanti te jnanam, he is going to teach you that knowledge, the knowledge that we have been talking about here. Jnanis tattvadarshinaha, because he himself is a self-realized person. He understands this knowledge. So if you reach to him, ask him and serve him, then he can impart that knowledge. So, approaching a spiritual master, asking him, and serving him. These are the three criteria mentioned here to receive the knowledge. A person who has not acquired sufficient purification, a person who is not ready to receive the transcendental knowledge, would see Guru as a normal human being. Bhaktya Mam Abhijanya. Krishna says that when you see my devotee, see them as me. So if you don't have that sufficient purification, if you are not qualified to receive the transcendental knowledge, will have not the value of our spiritual master. And if we don't understand who the spiritual master is, if we are not serious about Krishna consciousness, we are not going to inquire very seriously. Sometimes just asking something is very, very important how to approach a spiritual master. And when he gives you some guidance, then you have to take it. Serve him as Bapu or Vani, plus his instructions also. So what happens? We often give the example of His Divine Grace Prabhupada. Prabhupada was told by his spiritual master that take this message of Krishna consciousness and preach to all over the world. That teaching definitely would have some impact at that time on his divine grace. I mean, he was Satyavas's avatar, but just to prove the concept, over the time, that message would have become more and more stronger and clear. And adherence to that particular instruction would have become more and more stronger as you advance in the process of bhakti. So dealing with the spiritual master is very, very, kind of critical subject. You cannot just ask something, and then hear from the left hand, left ear, let it go through right ear. Ask questions which are really important, which is really something not for testing, not for purpose of asking something that I just want to ask, but ask something that is really important. And once you hear the answer, then trying to implement that in your life. All of that would happen only when a person has made sufficient purification. When the person is ready to receive that knowledge. So to answer Prabhu's question, when we are working, we are not working independently. Very, very important point. Very, 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 very important point to be noted. We in Krishna consciousness don't try to navigate the path by our own intelligence. It's very, very important that we surrender our intelligence to somebody superior, because that person knows my conditioning, just for the lack of word, my stage of consciousness. And since he's Tattvadarshi, Updesanti, basically the word there is Updesha. Updesha is there, the one who gives, who preaches. And here, the translation is imparting the knowledge. So Updechanti te jnanam, that knowledge he will impart to you, which he himself have realized. And being subservient to that knowledge. You have already, Prani Patena, you have already approached. Being subservient to that knowledge, he will receive that knowledge. So a strong, descending process coming from a spiritual master to disciple, disciple to disciple, disciple to disciple. In order to be a perfect spiritual master, one has to be a perfect disciple. So both side. Some part you can handle, some part you cannot. Then that has to come from your superior authority. So we are basically in middle. And that's the quality of Madhma Adhikari, right? What is the quality of the Madhma Adhikari? Prem, Daya, Maitri, and Upeksha. If he sees somebody who's superior or Supreme Personality of Godhead, he would have love. And somebody who is of his caliber, he will have friendship. Somebody who is innocent and is curious to know the science of Krishna consciousness, that person might be making some mistake, he will have compassion. But somebody who is jealousy of Krishna consciousness, who is always against, talking against of Krishna, that type of person, he will upeksha, he will basically go away, discard. So that's basically Madhma Adhikari platform, which is very high platform. So that's how we are. We are, it's very, very important to be able to see how I have to interact with certain personality. And it's not that we just decide everything by ourselves. We have to take guidance, we have to give the guidance, and we have to ourselves also flourish. At some time, at some point, we have to ignore. Don't think that ignoring is not the part of our process. Sometimes if something is not adaptable to you, for that time being, it's okay to ignore. Okay, so Prabhu, Manohar Prabhu, is this good enough or? And we'll hear from others.
Yeah. No, this was very nice, Prabhu. I had one follow-up question. I don't know whether we have time, but one thing I wanted to know, okay, this guidance we'll get from the Guru, and we will be then, he will fine-tune our desire and guide us. But when we say Nishkam Karma brings us to knowledge, knowledge itself is such a broad thing. I mean, it's like I want to go to Mars and I go upwards, and I know it is upwards, but will I hit Mars or will I hit Moon? Or will I go towards the sun? I don't know. So unless my knowledge is very accurate, I won't be able to reach my destination, right?
So reaching out to a spiritual master, that's what we are saying here.
Okay.
And Niskam Karma Yogi, through the process that we have gone through, has made sufficient purification. And now he has taken the shelter of a spiritual master. He is receiving the knowledge. So a spiritual master will tell that Mars basically coming and going 365 days. It takes 1 year, 180 days to go and 180 days to come down. So you have somebody who will tell, because he is Tattvadarshi. That's the importance of this verse. Now you are no longer by your own. But to receive that knowledge, we have to have some adhikar, right? Like, somebody will put the water in the shallow hand, how much water we can hold. But if you have something in the format of a glass, then you can hold more water, right? So the jnana has to be adapted. Or jnana has to be received. And for that, we have to have some, but this is again, for bhakti yogi, all of this happens simultaneously. We'll talk later.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so moving to the next verse. So the process of receiving the knowledge has been given. Now what Krishna says, Yaj gyatwana punarmoham yom yashashi pandava jena bhutani asesani drakshyashi atmani athomayi drikshasyashi. So he is drik, Drik dhatu. He is seeing. So drikshasi atmani athomai. Now here, very important point, very, very important point. Yad gyatwana punarmoham evam yasasi pandava jena bhutani asesani drikshasi atmani athomai. After receiving this knowledge, what will happen? You would again punarmoham, you would again not get captivated by this illusion. And what it will do is that it will give you that qualification through which Drikshashi Atmani Athomai. This is the quality of a Uttmadhikari. Right now, in later chapter, we'll talk about that. You come to that stage where you are seeing all living being as a part and parcel of me. Mama Yanisa Jiva Luke Jiva Bhuta Sanat. So that's so Krishna will next series of verses he will talk what that transcendental knowledge will start doing to you. You will have no confusion, no bewilderment, and many of you, most of you, all of you, I don't think you have any bewilderment. We all are striving our best to touch the feet of Krishna. So please, depending on the years of practice and seriousness in our Krishna consciousness, we have made some degree of advancement towards Krishna. And that advancement is basically in terms of, so when I say advancement, some degree of love towards Supreme Personality of Godhead, right? And that love is helping us to have more love, more love, more love, more love, right? And we all have very much stop meat eating, Jivdaya. That's the basic, philosophy there. And why too hard, mother living being? But still, there is some aparadh that we do. So maybe the very gross thing is not happening in our life, but we are still, when we get among the devotee, when we are dealing with the devotee, we have some still, aparadh that we do, some subtle thing that happens. But slowly and slowly, slowly and slowly, slowly and slowly, by the fire of bhakti, that will also go away. The anartha will be completely, gone. And then devotee will be fully situated in the stage of nistha. So all of us are towards that higher goal. Some degree of bewilderment, some, you know, uh, discrimination, and you will hear later that we have to discriminate also. Advancement does not mean that you don't discriminate. But once you come to that stage, when you are a Uttama Adhikari, then Shunichaiva Sopakecha Pandita Samadarshina. Doesn't matter, it's dog or dog eater. We see everybody as shame. So this Gyan is very powerful. So we just saw what that Gyan does. And then we'll talk more in next class. Next class will be the last class and we'll finish chapter 4. So we can take, let's see what's the time. It's 12:01. If you like to stay around and share something, please. Anybody, anything else that they would like to share? So I think it was nice that I could go through verse number 35, because this verse gives the results of that knowledge. So once we are in that knowledge, then we will start seeing, Krishna says that, this is nahi jnanena sadrisham pavitram iha vidyate. This is such a purest form of knowledge. We'll talk some of those things. So we'll see the benefits of this knowledge, this transcendental knowledge. Now we have received, or we have started receiving, not received, but we have started receiving the transcendental knowledge with a person who is Tattvadarshi. And under his guidance, we are receiving the knowledge. And we'll see this knowledge, how much miracle it will do to our consciousness. So with that, I would like to stop here and see if anybody has anything before we adjourn. Thank you all for being part of this class, for your enthusiasm and participation. Shastra study is very important because it gives you the sambandha. Krishna before talks about bhakti yoga, he is giving this knowledge that hey, you have to have that sambandh. So shastric study, the purpose of shastric study is that it will set us in a very nice framework to engage in devotional service. Whenever we are serving any service that we are doing, having a right context behind would give proper mood and attitude towards the service. And that's how. So all of these are limbs of bhakti. There are 5 prominent limbs, and one of them is Shastra. So we cannot say that Shastric study is not important. So all of these, will help us ultimately engage ourselves in devotional service with proper mood. So what we have, anybody would like to share any realization that you have? Bhaskar Prabhu, please make sure your audio system is working in the future. Yes, so that we can hear something from you, Prabhuji. Somebody said something.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji,
Dandavad,
Thank you,
Prabhuji.
Prabhuji. Very, very nice explanation on this Tatviti Prani Patena Pariprashnena Sevaya, Upadekshan Jnanam Jnanat Darshan verse. So that is a very important verse that applies very much to the today's world also. I feel like I connected because in this current world, everybody is becoming a YouTuber or something like that to give the knowledge, right? Like some mental concatenate knowledge. But here it is clearly from this verse, and as well as the other verse also, we always see Tatvijnanadam Sagurumevadi Gache. So to get the proper knowledge, one should be approaching the Guru. That is the way. Otherwise, we will be bewildered and will be misled all the time. So yeah, thank you, Prabhu. Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you so much.
Jai. Krishna is Guru for Arjun. So our gurus are also, yes, Prabhu, please go ahead.
So when Manar Prabhu asked that question, 3 things came to my mind. So whenever we have any kind of like such a good intention, so I mean, when any kind of intention, good or bad, we should always think whether it syncs with Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. That was the first thing which I thought about. Second thing is that many times it happens that we want to do something, but our Guru or Sadhu has not directly talked about it. Okay, it might be something which is not within that scope, because like just for an example, you spoke about having a yoga session for devotees. So your guru might have not spoken about it directly. We have spoken about the service to devotees, definitely, but then we'll have, because we need to check whether we have adhikar or not, because that's another thing. Do we have that adhikar? When we say adhikar, it might be an instruction from someone, or even have a proper knowledge that whether we might be a good yoga student, but are we a good yoga teacher? That's another question we have to ask ourselves. So whether we have adhikar or not. And then another thing which came to my mind, like in today's Bhagavatam class, one point came up that Rompat Maharaj has shared one statement like, the power of execution comes from instruction from Guru only. So I like that point very much, and I wanted to spend some time with that particular thought. It's a very thought-provoking thing. So, but it relates to your question also. So, whatever intentions we have, is it in line with Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra? Do we have adhikar to that? So these are the 2 points which can guide us to a proper conclusion.
Good points.
Yeah,
so we should, somebody is saying, please go ahead.
Prabhuji, I have a little, thought on this. Say, if I have a good intention, say, maybe I don't know any guru, or I don't have any guru, okay? So having the good intention and the good things can't maybe Krishna might direct us in the right path, if we have in good intentions.
Yes, that's
I don't
correct.
know. What do you think about it, Prabhuji?
Yeah. If you have a right intent, dadati buddhi yogantam tena mamu piyantite. Yes, Krishna will give us the intelligence through which we can uh, come. But also we need to have at least that type of intelligence to understand, is it instruction coming from my conditioning, swabhava, or it is coming from my value system, which is Guru Shastra and Sadhu.
Yeah.
Yes, so that's good.
Prabhu, can I
Ji
share
Mataji.
something?
Yes,
So,
please.
verse 35, which says like, after knowing, uh, yeah, after knowing this, you will never fall down. Like, so, no bewilderment. Like that means, I feel like this verse is very powerful in achieving world peace, I would say. But the world peace does not like mean like in a world all over, peace all over the world, but it brings peace within you to know that the living entities, all the living entity and non-living entity as well, is a property of, is a part of me. Like Krishna is saying, they are living beings, are part of me. So that when we have that knowledge, we will not uh, take more than what we are assigned, uh, whatever our quota is. Number one. Number two, will not harm anybody unnecessarily, like unsanctioned violence will not be committed. So
Yes,
this
nice.
knowledge is very powerful.
Very powerful. Yes, Mataji. Thank you. Yes, it's very powerful. So one of the point that Amoghram Prabhu mentioned is empowerment comes through the instruction. Please remember that. And if somebody who are line of authority, if somebody who is Prabhupada very clearly said that your intelligence is to be subservient to the line of authority. And if you have done ISKCON disciple course, we talk about that. There are, managerial line of authority, and then there is a spiritual line of authority. So any authority, you have to have the intelligence, but if the instruction is coming from any line of authority, your perfection is executing that to the best of your capacity. And that, and without thinking it's right or wrong, or without thinking, was it really good for, no, if you really take that as an instruction, try to execute it, you would get the sufficient or same result as you would get otherwise. So what the service itself, in devotional service, one thing you have to very nicely, remember all the time, like, doing this Bhagavatam Katha, that itself is a reward for me. While I'm talking about Krishna, that itself is purifying me. So the action, the service itself is a reward. You all doing homework, that itself is a reward. Although we give the Bhakti Shastri certificate, but if you engage in this type of process, the process is going to purify. By executing and taking the order from the authority, this will purify. Krishna will give you the award that you deserve. So that's why one of the things that we have to also, and very important thing that I personally believe in, very, very important, that we develop the mood to be servants. Very important. And don't use too much of what's already the conditioning type of intelligence. Follow the process, hierarchy, and see over the time Krishna will empower you. Krishna will give you the sufficient purification. So there is certain way we can approach devotional service, or the whole process of purification, or everything that we do. The mood has to be right. The Vaishnava etiquette has to be right. Has to have the understanding that when I'm approaching Shastra, it's words of Krishna. how I should receive it. So there are so many other components to it, but being thoughtful and all-rounded is what is needed for you to have a strong foundation and longevity in your Krishna consciousness. If you want to make this life perfect, and if you want to stay whole life very enthusiastic, Krishna conscious, you have to have that good balance and sufficient understanding, and then building your Krishna consciousness on it. So there are multiple components of that, and we will talk some of those in disciple course that we do. A lot of things, basically disciple course is talking about some of those things, and then also in future we might launch a course. I'm still working on it, the chart type of course, where some basic understanding has to happen. That, for example, my intelligence is not ignoring Manohar Krishna's Prabhu's recommendation. That's not my intelligence. No. If he is the one who is asking me to do something and he is the authority, my intelligence is to serve. So that type of service, serve, that type of thing, anything that we do for service, for purification, those changes has to start happening in our consciousness. Then you will release it. Then you will see the reward. You don't have to worry for somebody else to come and give you the reward. Otherwise, the action that you are engaged in, that itself will be reward for you. So yes, and over the time you will realize it. As we advance, as we grow in the process of Krishna consciousness, we'll realize it. But in order for us to happen that, have to have a right frame of work, right frame of mood, so that we can really release it. And as we go through Bhagavatam study, in fact, Nectar of Devotion will talk a lot about some of these things. A lot. So let's get through Bhagavad Gita, and then some of these things we'll keep on talking. But it's very good that you all are sharing your realization, and and whatever understanding you have, whatever I have, is very good to share. Anything before we conclude? It's already 14. If not, then we'll chant Vaishnava Pranam. Who would like to chant the Vaishnava Pranams? Let's do it. You can unmute yourself and do it.
Vanchakalpatarubhyascha
Rubheshya
kripa
kripa sindhu
sindhuvaiva cha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo namo namah. Anant Koti Vaishnav Vipinda ki jai.
Thank you. Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Dandot Pranam. So 2 o'clock we have meetings for local devotees. I request all of you to come and be part of that. And I'll see you next
Which
Saturday at
meeting,
the same
Prabhuji?
time.
2
Today,
o'clock, which meeting?
today we have meeting at 2 o'clock. Follow up after the summit.
But do we have that meeting sent out? I don't have
Yeah,
anything.
Mataji, it has been sent out on the WhatsApp as well as the email.
Yes. So I saw here that the communication message has 2 p.m. today, and the Zoom link is there. So please join
Sure,
at
Prabhuji. Thank you.
2 o'clock. Dandot pranams to everybody. Keep it up. Thank you. Hare
Thank
Very
you.
Krishna.
simple.
Hare Bol. Hare Krishna.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Hare. Hare Krishna.